When shooting 360 photos at nighttime, auto exposure can do a bad job, resulting in your shots becoming blurry, overexposed, underexposed, too much contrast, or too much noise. With the correct camera settings, however, you can produce some truly amazing results at nighttime. So in this video, I'll share my best tips and tricks for getting awesome 360 photos in low light. My first tip is to use a monopod, tripod, or fixed camera setup of some kind. Shooting handheld when the light isn't good will greatly increase the chances of motion blur, whereas if your camera doesn't move at all while shooting, the chances of motion blur will be 0. So which settings should you use? Well, there are multiple ways to expose your shots at night. The fastest and easiest method I'd recommend in scenes that are dark but not too dark, or in mixed lighting, is using the inbuilt HDR mode of your camera. This will automatically balance out the shadows and highlights by capturing separate exposures for all strengths of light and combining them together automatically into one photo. This is done exceptionally well with the Theta X. In fact, it's so good that you don't need to do any color correction to this image. So regardless of which camera you own, always start by trying HDR mode, ideally on a monopod. However, what if it's really dark? In really low light, HDR mode won't always be the best option because it does use auto exposure on the individual exposures, which will want to turn the ISO up and make your shots really noisy. This is where setting the exposure manually may just be the best option. So open up your manual exposure settings, and the primary setting you'll want to change is the shutter speed. Basically, the longer the shutter speed you set, the more time you give your camera to capture light for the photo. A 1 second shutter speed? Think of it like opening the shutters in a room. A 1 second shutter speed allows 1 second of light to hit the camera's sensor, brightening up the shot. This might be appropriate for scenes that are dark, but not that dark. A 30-second shutter speed, however, a 30-second shutter speed gives your camera 30 seconds to capture ambient light within the environment, which after a while will help you light up even the darkest location, while also keeping noise to a minimum. Now, this isn't a one-size-fits-all setting. You will want to adjust your shutter speed either up or down depending on how bright your shots turn out. But essentially, the longer your shutter speed, the brighter your shots will be. Okay, the exposure's finished. Great. Anyway, if you do choose longer shutter speeds, just be sure to 1. Set your ISO as low as possible to avoid excess noise. Higher ISO means higher noise, and this is something that can easily be avoided. And 2, you'll probably want to avoid being in shot unless you hold really, really still, since even the smallest amount of movement can cause ghosting. Ghosting is another common issue at night, where moving subjects or elements become blurry or ghost-like. Ooh! This is because low light shots rely on longer shutter speeds, which will blur even the smallest amount of movement. To fix this, hold really, really still for the whole duration of the exposure if you do plan on being in shot. One effect you will want to move with, however, is the light painting effect. Light painting allows you to draw in the sky of your night shots and has a serious wow factor. To do a light painting, firstly, you'll need to find a really dark location. This is because you'll need a minimum of 10 seconds to do your drawing, which means a 10-second shutter speed, which would completely overexpose locations that already have a bit of light in them. So once you've found a dark location, start by standing about 6 feet from the camera so your painting doesn't appear too big or too small. Here I'm setting the exposure to 20 seconds at the lowest ISO, then activating a 5-second countdown timer on the camera so I have time to get in position. Once the camera started the exposure, I used the flashlight on my iPhone to write the numbers 360. However, in order to separate the numbers, I had to turn the light off once I'd finished each number, then turn it on again once I was in position to start the next one. If you're writing text, you'll also need to write the characters backwards, since the camera sees the reverse perspective of what you see when facing it. Now, this effect will take a few attempts to get right, but will be well worth it for the final result. And you can try a range of lighting effects, like walking around the camera with the light, or even using lights of different shapes and colors. A bit of creativity can go a long way with light painting. By the way, if you want to learn how to make awesome tiny planet shots like my light painting, feel free to download my free ebook, which shares hundreds of my best creative ideas. Finally, if you're shooting longer exposures and your camera does have a RAW option, using RAW will allow you to capture more detail and dynamic range while also offering more flexibility to adjust the exposure in editing. Shooting in low light can definitely be tricky, but between HDR mode and using longer shutter speeds, you should be able to get the best results possible out of any type of nighttime situation. And if you're already taking stunning 360 photos, but you're struggling to share them due to limited sharing options, in this video here I'll share 5 great solutions that will help you share your 360 masterpieces with ease.